Welcome to A Lawyer's Guide to the Galaxy, a podcast about geek culture by lawyers with your hosts, Ben Siders and Kirk Damon.
Today's episode is sponsored by Alfred and McGoffin's Lost and Found. Looking for something? Found something? Just come to McGoffin's. By the time you get there, you'll have forgotten all about it.
And welcome back to A Lawyer's Guide to the Galaxy, the podcast that asks interesting questions that don't have any answers, with your host, Ben Siders, that's me, and the other guy is, as always, Kirk Damon.
That's Kirk, as in the captain of the Enterprise.
We are intellectual property lawyers and certified geeks practicing law in St. Louis, Missouri. You can find me, Ben, on Twitter at Benjamin Siders, and you can find Kirk at KirkDMN. You can follow this podcast on Twitter at LGGPod and find all of this information on our webpage, www.lggpodcast.com. Kirk, we're back.
We're back. Welcome to Season 3.
It's 2020, and we are officially starting Season 3 of LGG Podcast. So a decision that we made this morning after extensive deliberation, by which I mean I walked into your office and said, let's make this Season 3.
Yeah, we decided that this would be Season 3. It's the start of a new year. Everything's new. So it's appropriate that we're going to go ahead and start and try to do some different stuff here. And that's not the only change we're making.
So today's episode, we're going to do our Rise of Skywalker review and then kind of go over the predictions we made last year. We were going to talk about The Mandalorian, but I still haven't seen the back half of the...
How could you not have seen the last half of The Mandalorian?
I just haven't had time, but we'll get to that and we'll put that on the shelf for the time being. But we're also going to do some sort of format changes going forward. So one of the things that we both really want to do this year is get LGG podcast content out to you on a more regular basis. Yep. And so two big changes. I'm going to put big in sarcasm quotes. One, instead of a Monday release, we're going to release on Wednesday.
Yep, we are. And part of this is, and I think just for anybody with us, we both listen to a lot of podcasts, and we're actually starting to get kind of annoyed at podcasts releasing on Monday, just because
it creates a huge backlog. And I get it on Monday, and I've got all this stuff to cover, and like by Thursday, I've finally gotten through it.
Yeah, and then by Thursday, you need new content and don't have any.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that's definitely one of the things we're going to try to do. And the other thing we're going to try to also do is get you podcasts regularly on every Wednesday.
Yeah, every Wednesday. And that may mean that we're going to need to do some different formats, some different types of shows, just to make sure we can get you something that's mostly new content. We may occasionally sprinkle in some rebroadcasts, we'll say, of older episodes that maybe you've either missed or that are relevant to a theme that we are working on at the time.
Yep.
But we want to make sure that whether we have new content or not, you will have something on your LGG podcast feed for Wednesday each week. And if we just happen to get busy, it may just be a couple of old episodes.
Yeah, I mean, some of it's, we're also planning that there will be some re-released episodes on purpose. We're starting to plan out what we're going to be talking about this season. Again, so the idea of the creation of the season. We know there's some we want to specifically have people listen to again because they're going to relate to other things we're going to talk about. So
another change, we're going to be rotating around locations for recording. Kirk and I are both involved in the St. Louis entrepreneurship scene. And so today's episode is actually being recorded at the St. Louis Central Library.
Yeah, this is actually kind of cool. A friend told us about this, that they have a recording studio in the Central Library here that you can record podcasts in. You can, I assume, use it for music, it looks like, given some of the other stuff that's in this room. But this is cool. I had no idea this was here. And this is a professional setup that you can just come in and use.
It really is nice. So we're still kind of messing around with the dials and the knobs here to try and get the volume control right. So let us know how the episode sounds. You may have some oddities with the voice volume until we kind of settle in on getting our faces at the right distance from the microphone and everything else.
Well, I have a baffled microphone and Ben doesn't, so there's a little bit differences to what our microphones are. So yeah,
it's different from a regular setup, and we'll be back at our regular location from time to time as well. So, but let us know how it sounds and what you think. So on that note, let's talk about our predictions. We actually made, so if you don't remember, in Season 2, Episode 15, well, let's start with this. Spoiler alert. We're going to talk about
Rise of Skywalker.
And Rise of Skywalker. So
if you have not seen Rise of Skywalker, I'm not sure it's in theaters anymore.
It may not be. The movies are in and out so fast now. But if you haven't seen it, go see it. And if you haven't seen it and you don't want spoilers, you might want to come back to this episode later. So you've been warned, and it's on you now. Okay. So we did 15, I don't know what you call it, predictions, I guess, that
predictions.
Were kind of floating around the internet when we recorded Season 2, Episode 15, which, by the way, I think we recorded that in September or October. It was a while ago.
Yeah, I think you said it was September we actually had done it. I know it was definitely in advance as to what it was, and it released obviously a couple of weeks after we did it as well. So even when it came out, it was later.
I've got September written in my notes, but I think it may have been October. That just seems too far back. But at any rate, it was at least 2 months before the movie actually came out. So these are statements or predictions about things that would happen in Episode 9 that Kirk and I each gave our opinion on. Although as we get into this, you'll see that we occasionally forgot to say what we think would happen. We just flapped our gums about it for a little bit.
Yeah, we also added a few other additional predictions.
Yeah.
Follow-up text and everything else.
So here's number 1. Our first prediction was Mark Hamill appears on screen as a Force ghost. We both said true. And although, you know what we didn't do was, does anybody say I've got a bad feeling about this? I assume somebody did, but I can't remember.
I don't remember. There was something in it, if I remember correctly. I don't remember.
It felt shoehorned in. Number 2 was Princess Leia dies. I actually said false. Kirk said true.
Well, I think the idea behind it was that she really die on screen. That was the question, or had she died ahead of time?
Yep.
And I mean, obviously she did die on screen.
Yep.
Very dramatically on screen.
Well, Kirk also predicted, I re-listened to this, Kirk predicted that Luke and Leia would be the 2 Force ghosts at the end of the movie, which was correct.
Which was correct.
Number 3, we find out who Rey's parents really, really are. I said true and Kirk said false, but Kirk's reason for false was, can we trust them?
Can we trust them? Yeah, and that's, I have to admit, I look at it and I said, we gave you the point in this saying that we did actually show who they really, really are. I'm not sure we really know who they really were because we don't really know who those people are.
No, I mean, we're giving her lineage, I guess, is the spirit of the question.
Yes.
So I did award myself a point, and I did not award Kirk one, but as you'll see, it doesn't matter. Kirk wins anyway. Spoiler alert. Number 4, we meet more Knights of Ren. We both said true. That basically did happen.
Yeah,
although we also predicted they would be the villains in the future, but they were all killed, so I don't think that's going to happen. Number 5 is tricky. It was Snoke is back.
Yeah.
Parts of him are, I guess.
Parts of him are.
In a jar?
Well, he's in a jar, though. It's from what I've read of some of the stuff talking about it, one that was added very late in post-production, apparently. Because they just thought it would be cool to have parts of Snoke in a jar, and it was not supposed to be Snark in a jar. It was not supposed to be Snoke. It was supposed to be essentially future Snopes. The fact that he was a clone.
Well, that was one of my comments too. I said true, but they'll bring Snoke back in a roundabout way. I said it'll either be time travel, or it turns out that Snoke is actually Palpatine, which goes
true.
Yeah,
I mean, technically
pretty close.
Snoke was Palpatine.
Yeah.
I mean, he made him, so.
6, Kylo Ren is redeemed and becomes Ben Solo. We both said true. That happened. No surprise there.
Pretty much, yeah.
We both, Finn and Rose become a thing. We both said false. We were right. They could not back away from Rose fast enough. The movie was the poorer for it, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's actually, if you guys haven't seen it, there's actually, I think, a great review out there talking about Episode 9 that basically said they thought the abandonment of Rose was the biggest mistake they made. And
it was an overreaction to the fan dislike of the character, which I never understood. What fans didn't like.
I didn't understand the dislike of the character, and I very much agree with this. I said this sort of third-party review you can find online, where had they have kept that portion of it, it actually would have really helped the movie.
Yeah, because we talked about when we did these that they don't know what to do with Finn's character, and giving a romantic interest kind of gives the character something to fight for and a little more direction besides just being afraid of the First Order. And they just kind of made him the third wheel, I guess. I don't know.
One of the ones, if you guys have seen it, there is the draft script floating around, which apparently has been verified as actually being a draft script. And it was supposed to start with Finn and Rose basically on a mission together. And that was going to be an important sort of aspect of it.
That would have been neat.
Things. And I really looked at it and said, that would have been cool. That's something they totally should have done.
That makes more sense to me than having Poe Dameron out doing this stuff. He's like a captain of the fighter fleet. You know?
Yeah.
It's like pulling somebody who runs your F-18 squadron out of the Air National Guard and saying you're going to Iran.
We're sending Maverick instead of James Bond.
Okay, number 8, Captain Phasma becomes more than a prop. I said true. Kirk said false. We both said false. I have true written down, but I had said false. She wasn't even in it, so that's also a shame. Number 9, there's another Death Star to blow up, and we clarified that we meant for narrative purposes. There's something that has to be exploded for the plot to move forward. I don't know why I said false, but I did. Kirk said true. And of course there was. There was 10,000 Death Stars.
I think the thought was, I think when we really looked at it, we said it wasn't going to be the fleet, it was going to be a single target, and it was a single target. And ultimately, there was a thing you had to destroy to stop the bad thing from happening, of course. Exactly.
Kirk said it might not be another Death Star, but there will be something they have to blow up at the end of the movie because they don't know how to end a Star Wars movie without blowing something up.
And that's exactly what happened, unfortunately.
Number 10, Harrison Ford appears on screen. We both said true. Kirk said he'd be a Force ghost. I said he'd be like a hologram or something.
Yeah, you got that one a little more right than I did.
Close,
That's what it is. He's been said he's not a Force ghost.
He's a memory.
He's a memory.
11, another major character other than Leia dies. I didn't actually answer this one, but I did think it was true. But since I didn't answer it on the podcast, I did not give myself a point.
Yep.
Kirk also said true. Kirk said both Rey and Kylo Ren would die.
Which I argue did happen.
That's the thing, because I said I'd give you double credit if it did. We have to be careful with these. From now on, when we say this, we mean they die and stay dead.
Yes, they're technically both zombies. I mean, that's the issue. Is I think there's, we definitely see, I think, in conjunction with it, Rey actually die. I mean, sort of in the way they do it.
Yeah.
But we also see Kylo Ren dying unquestionably earlier.
Yeah.
Then we see him sort of die again and come back. So, I mean, they almost died multiple times.
Yeah, Kylo Ren dies like 3 times in this movie. They really wanted to put him through it. So I gave Kirk credit for that. 12th one, a character from the prequel trilogy who was not also in the original trilogy appears on screen. We both said true. I suggested maybe a Hayden Christensen appearance. There was a Hayden Christensen voiceover, but I don't think he actually is in the movie ever.
No,
not as like Anakin.
He's just the voiceover in conjunction with the Yoda lines, with all the all the Jedi are me line.
Yeah, so that was
we both got wrong.
True for we both got that one. We both said true. We were both wrong.
I think it's the only one we're both wrong on, isn't it?
Yeah. Number 13. They never explain the following hanging threads from The Force Awakens. We did half credits on these. The first one was how Maz Kanata got Anakin Skywalker. Kirk thought they would explain it. I thought they would not. And we also want to note that we thought that lightsaber was convincingly destroyed in Episode 8, but it's back without explanation somehow.
Well, actually, interesting enough, that's another one of the things that it talks about, again, with the missing script, that sort of draft script, that was something that was addressed in the draft script and was not, that it was definitively destroyed. They've sort of said, yes, it was definitively destroyed and have not explained how it came back. Apparently, in the draft script, they actually would indicate that she would have rebuilt it, that Rey actually had rebuilt it.
But the exact same way, again, even looking the same and everything?
She had little parts, I think, is the
I guess. That just feels like another middle finger to Rian Johnson.
Well, she was going to have it. I think she was supposed to also have her own lightsaber in conjunction with it. So, again,
she did at the end. She had a yellow one, I think, or something?
Yeah, she has a yellow blade one at the end, which I have to admit, I like the fact that we have a blade other than the lone purple blade, from the
See, I would have pink. I would have the hottest bubblegum pink lightsaber. Yeah.
I actually always commented that I always thought yellow would be a cool one, actually.
Yeah, me too.
Yellow or orange would actually be kind of cool.
I think I told you when we did the Star Wars role-playing game I used to play when we were in college, one of the characters was a Jedi, and he went to go make his lightsaber, and I had the idea that he didn't make his roll to craft it correctly.
Okay.
But it was close. So I said the lightsaber works, but I decided that the blade was in a non-visible color spectrum.
Oh, jeez.
So we had an invisible lightsaber blade that was like infrared. And then I thought, that'd actually be a cool idea for an actual character. It's like a character who sees into the infrared spectrum, so only he can actually see where his lightsaber blade is. Sort of like the Predator. That would be cool, but it never made it in.
Yeah, that's something I don't think they'd ever actually go.
No, that involves too much actual science.
Yes, too much actual science, and probably too few digital effects.
Yeah, exactly. And people be confused. I don't get it. How come he can see it? And then the second one part of this was Kylo Ren has a remark in The Force Awakens where he says, "Show me again, grandfather." They kind of explained this. There was a James Earl Jones voiceover when Kylo Ren meets Palpatine, and he says, "Every voice you've heard, that was all me the whole time." So they explained what that was. So this was the opposite. They explained the one that we didn't think they would, and they ignored the one that we thought they would explain.
Yeah.
So we each got a half point on that. 14, one of the following terrible ideas will play a role in the plot. I said yes. Kirk said I hope not, but didn't really answer.
I think that was the answer that it would, unfortunately.
Time travel, no. Somebody's related to Boba Fett, no. Somebody's actually a clone. And I said specifically, Palpatine makes clones of himself and transfers his consciousness into them. Basically.
Sort of,
yeah. So I gave myself a point for that, but as you'll see, it doesn't matter. And then 15, we learn at least one new thing that completely changes our understanding of the original or prequel trilogies. We both said true, but there really wasn't anything I didn't think that rose to that level. Not to where you'd watch it again and be like, well, this scene means something else to me now. Not really.
Yeah, I don't think that's really true at all. I think we saw stuff that gives more background to the characters. We understand much more about Palpatine.
Yeah.
We see, okay, Palpatine's like trying to corrupt Luke. We see him doing it again. This is a common theme. But that doesn't really change. The fact that it's a common theme doesn't change anything you have.
So in the end, Kirk had 9.5 right out of 15. I had 8.5 right. So congratulations. I think you're undefeated in these things.
I think I am. I think I won the last one too. But the thing about it is, and also we're obviously very close. What I do think is so interesting about the predictions is how many of them, like I said, at least one of us got right. Recognizing we did end up
I think there's only one that we both just completely whiffed on.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's do our general review, setting aside the predictions, which are just sort of fun to see. It's interesting. We kind of make fun of we both love Star Wars, obviously. We're big Star Wars fans. We also like to pick on it because it's just so easy to pick on.
Because it's too easy to pick on, yes.
But it's interesting, like, as predictable as we think it is, even with these predictions, we only got a little more than 60%, right?
Yeah.
So there's enough of this that we didn't quite nail.
Now, admittedly, we did also take a little bit of sort of fun with the predictions of things that are sort of would they really dare do this type of arguments? And unfortunately, they did in a couple of cases, and they didn't in a couple of cases.
So, general thoughts. What did you like the most about the movie?
My basic thought with it, I liked the fact that, well, it mostly concluded the saga. I think it left it a little bit too open at the end. I really thought the end was just a little bit ambiguous. The thing that I sort of most enjoyed about it, quite frankly, was the sort of Sith audience chamber, which I know a lot of people didn't like.
I wasn't sure how to interpret that scene. I interpreted it as sort of like a vision or like a hallucination or something like that. But a lot of people thought there literally was just an arena with tens of thousands of Sith in it. Yeah. That's not how I interpreted that scene at all.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I didn't interpret it as it really was people there. I interpreted it more as it was supposed to be a Force ghost, a projection
because he says all the Sith are in me. So that's him like projecting it out. And I kept waiting for her to project all the Jedi on the opposite side. I was like, oh no, are we going to have like a weird ghost battle now?
Yeah, I was expecting that to potentially happen as well.
Thank goodness that did not happen. Yeah. But,
the one thing I really liked is that I liked the concept of the way the sort of Sith advanced. It's, okay, the way you become a Sith is you kill the prior Sith.
Yeah.
And it's that's almost like institutionalized.
It's like an evil version of Highlander, basically. Right? Yeah. Like you kill the last one and you get all of his powers.
Exactly. And that's what happens. But yeah, it's one of those where what I do really like about it is the concept of like the Sith has this sort of very dark genealogy now. Where you realize that, hey, like the only reason any people become this is because they kill the prior one, and they also realize they have to be killed by the next one. And I liked the fact that Palpatine was not, just okay with that, but was like actively pursuing it. Like, this is what happens.
Well, also trying to cheat the system too, like in some ways.
In some ways, but I also get the impression, and I think the thing I got from it, since we didn't see the end conclusion of it, I really kind of got the impression that it was, no, Rey is not going to become the Empress in the way she thinks she potentially was. She's really just going to become Palpatine. Like, Palpatine's going to take over because there's really only one Palpatine. Mm-hmm. So there's all these, and again, that's where I kind of have the idea of like the projection. There's only ever really been one Sith. And it's a perpetual body type thing, but it's really only one consciousness that acquires values from the other consciousnesses.
Yeah, it's sort of like a one-man Borg, basically. Yeah. It just absorbs all these things.
And it also kind of writes off the fact, the other thing I liked about it is, okay, Darth Maul dying doesn't matter because he's not the Emperor. Darth Vader dying doesn't matter because he's not the Emperor. Okay, like that's kind of nice as well. Like the apprentice has to kill the master for it to matter.
Did you interpret the final scene as being the Sith are now destroyed because the last one that was left has finally been located and killed?
Yeah, I mean, I got that from it. It's the thing that still potentially haunts me, and it's the constant thing that I have with it. Again, I didn't think the ending was definitive enough, is there will be balance in the Force. It's out of balance again. There are no Sith.
And there's, I guess, one Jedi.
And there's one Jedi.
Gone, so, what was interesting, though, I kind of interpreted her going to Tatooine at the end and kind of resuming the Lars homestead life as her not adopting the Jedi role in the galaxy and just saying, it dies with me. She's going to go and be a moisture evaporator or whatever.
But she built a lightsaber. She buries the lightsabers of Luke and Leia, but she's built her own.
But to me, that was Disney saying, no, don't do everything. Like, we may come back to this and want to resurrect the plot in 10 years, so we need to be able to go find those again.
And like I said, that was the problem I had with it, is I thought it was a nice definitive ending but it still wasn't quite definitive enough. I appreciated the fact that she had a lightsaber. I wish she would have had it in the beginning.
Was that Leia's? It was Leia's, right? The yellow one?
Yeah, the yellow one's hers. She has Leia's when she actually fights Palpatine.
Okay.
Because she gets, and I actually like that as a moment where she gets Leia's and Anakin's goes to Kylo Ren, which I think is a sort of appropriate, play off of that as well. But it's one of those things where, again, I really wanted this movie to definitively end the Star Wars saga.
Well, and I think that's a good point. So I think you kind of hit on it. Overall, I kind of agree. I felt like it was a generally satisfying ending. Like, it's not how I would have done it, but I got to the end, I was like, okay, it's fine. Yeah, I don't feel like I was tricked into going to see. Like, I felt that way in episode 2, or after episode 1, I kind of thought, this will just be the one bad one that we kind of forget about, which it is. Then I got to 2, and I was like, no, this is also bad. And this 8, I didn't feel that episode 8 was as I don't know, a lot of like the true Star Wars fans hated Episode 8. I really did. And if you were to, we'll get to this in a second, the rankings, I would say 8 was the best of the 3 as far as just a movie and a story goes. It was certainly the most ambitious and interesting, despite the whole Canto Bight thing, which I think could have removed that entire piece. But as far as the conclusion goes, it's fine. It's fine. You know, it's pretty hard to satisfy everybody, and I felt like they were trying to end this in a way that made the fewest number of people furious.
Yeah, I also take a little bit of there is a need for toy tie-ins. There is a need for marketing behind this. Those kind of things are just ubiquitous in movies now. It's just the way it has to be. But it's, and that's sort of why I accepted like she needed to have a lightsaber, is because we need to be able to sell Kylo Ren's lightsaber in Disney World. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I'm okay with that in some respects. Like, she did need a lightsaber because she is a Jedi. Yeah, we should have one. I like the fact that it's unique. What I don't like is the fact that you only see it right at the end, implying she hasn't actually given up being a Jedi, even though that's kind of what they're implying.
Yeah, there's a little sort of a narrative conflict there. Okay, so what did you like the least?
So one of the things with it, I don't think I mentioned in the podcast, I saw the movie a little bit of a weird way.
Oh, yeah.
So I went to go see it opening night. I saw 3/4 of it opening night because my son promptly got sick in the course of doing it. We had to go home.
And the next day I said, Kirk, how was the movie? He was like, well, the part I saw was good.
Yeah, I went to the part I saw. The thing that I really commented about it is when I walked out, just so you guys know, I had to stop watching it essentially as we have and I'd seen parts of it, a little bit of it, as we're having the final climatic battle. I saw a few images of it because, again, we had to run out to the bathroom. We had to come back. We had a couple of ins and outs so I could figure out part of it. But a couple of the things with it is I basically stopped watching it as coherently as a movie at the time that we have the lightsaber duel between Kylo Ren and Rey on the old Death Star.
Mm-hmm.
The next thing I saw was her on the Sith planet. And I'm like, I missed 5 minutes. How on earth did we get here? And that was really my biggest complaint about it. Having just seen the first 3/4 of the movie, having not yet seen it, I was very confused as to what was happening, what these locations were, if I was supposed to get references. I found it to be very incoherent.
Mm-hmm.
When we then went back and saw it again a week later, I was able to actually see the full movie. It made much more sense to me because I got to see a few of these connecting scenes.
Yeah, but still not complete sense. We'll get into that,
yes,
too.
But not complete sense. And I said that was by far the sort of thing that bothered me, I think, the most. Is the movie had a very jumpy, slightly incoherent feel.
Yeah.
And particularly because it basically tried to toss Episode 8 and, like, purposely counteract
There was a
Episode
lot of
8.
that. Like, we heard you fans, we're going to have to go back and walk all this back.
Yeah, and so it's things like, why on earth is Rose not a character? Why on earth is Rose and Finn not really interacting with each other? Like,
they gave Rose the Poochie treatment from The Simpsons. I have to go back to my planet now and kind of lift her out of the frame, and she's no longer
exactly.
in the story.
And it was like, this just doesn't make sense. We then bumped into, wait a minute, why does she have Anakin's lightsaber? Oh, wait, why are we suddenly with Luke? Why is Luke as a Force ghost? Why can he do things? Like, there was just all this kind of stuff that was like, wait, none of this makes any sense from what we've been setting up in the past 2 movies, particularly in Episode 8. Okay, I have to read this as we are purposely saying Episode 8 didn't happen, and I'm
there was too much of too much meta in this, too much filmmaker awareness of audience expectations.
Yeah,
which then in turn influences the film, and. To me, that's just as bad as saying I'm making a movie to get critics to like it so I can win awards. Like, you can do that, but I guess this kind of is a question-begging exercise. What is artistic integrity, and does it matter? Like, is it okay?
No.
Yeah. The answer is it doesn't. Who's your audience? What are you making movies for? You're making a movie for people to go see it and like it.
Yeah, so. These are mass market movies. These are not supposed to have great messages. They might have a basic overarching morality for children. Something like that.
That said, I still think there were missed opportunities here.
Yeah.
We'll get into that more in a second too. What was the biggest surprise to you?
I think the fact that Rose really wasn't in it. That really kind of stunned me. And I think because I understood there was the backlash against Rose, but I was firmly in the camp. I literally wanted a bumper sticker that said Rose is my new hero. Like, I thought she was just a fascinating character. I loved the concept. I loved the fact that she was an engineer, sort of adventurer.
A little socially awkward, like you and I relate to that.
Yeah. I loved her as a character. I really did. And it was one of those things where to suddenly have her be that relegated, I was like, okay, I understand the fact that maybe they had trouble scripting her into certain things, but why can't she go on the mission? Like, how hard is it to script her into that? And again,
it's not like she's Jar Jar Binks. I mean, how mad are people going to be if the Rose character does some interesting, neat things?
Yeah, and quite frankly, if there's huge concern about the Rose character, we don't want to make anything of the Rose character, why can't we send her on a mission and have her die on screen? Make a big deal out of this. Messes Finn up.
Make her Scotty, but give her the Spock treatment. There's a lot of stuff you could have done there.
Yeah, and so that was, I think, my biggest sort of surprise to me was the fact that she just got written out so bad.
Yeah, and so that was, to me, the biggest surprise was just how blatantly they were like, nope, everything in episode 8 is a big nope. Nope, nope, left and right.
Yeah.
Biggest eye-rolling moment.
We can't have a ground attack against the radar on the ground. We're going to have a ground attack on the Star Destroyer.
Yeah. The eye roll to me was the entire plot device of, I know it's a galaxy that has space wizards and planet-killing spaceships, but we still just can't manage a vertical takeoff and landing without something that a modern aircraft can do. A modern drone in my living room can do, but these ships for some reason can't. And there's some throwaway line about the environment there. If the environment's that bad, don't build the ships there.
Yeah, I thought actually, and I said that the biggest eye roll. I joke about the assaulting the radar. The radar as a MacGuffin was also one of those things where I was just like, okay, why do we even have to assault it on the ground? It's a radar. Why don't we just drop a bomb on it? We've noted that there's bombers.
Have bombers. We saw them in episode 8. Well, I guess those don't exist anymore either.
Well, we have Y-wings. They're bombers.
Yeah, and B-wings.
Yeah, and so, but it was that kind of thing. I think that was the big eye-rolling moment. The other one, and you've mentioned this, and I think it was a big eye-rolling moment, quite frankly, was we have to go conscript more children to be, our, pilots and work on the Star Destroyers, and because we're the evil empire. And then we have the good rebellion coming in and going, we're going to mercilessly slaughter people who can't defend themselves.
It's like 10,000 Star Destroyers full of conscripted civilians, and we just kill them all.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other one, I think it's appropriate I went in the moment, but I also like the fact that they actually, I think, poke slight fun at it, was they have the Star Destroyer suddenly is a planet destroyer and actually lives up to its name, which was a complete eye roll. I was like, wait, no, we don't have one Death Star, we have 10,000 Death Stars. Great. But then they get that information to the rebellion. The rebellion's kind of like, yeah, there we go again. Like okay,
like the characters on screen are practically rolling their eyes at some of this stuff.
Yeah, and I think that I wouldn't say it's the biggest eye rolling moment because I think it slightly was we need it as a plot device. We're going to use it as a plot device because we can, but we're also going to recognize that it's kind of a blunt, obviously.
They handled that really well in episode 7 when he puts up Starkiller Base and Han Solo's like, and everybody goes, oh, Han Solo goes, so it's big. There's always still a way to blow it up. Like, very, very self-aware in a fun way, whereas this one was more serious and almost like, you never seen this before, have you? 10,000 Death Stars. I'm just like, are you kidding me? Well, especially when in episode 8, I've got this in one of my points of overall narrative things. In episode 8, we see the fleet and the technology it has. And they have one disassembled Death Star gun that takes all this effort to get down to the planet and set up to fire one shot.
Yeah.
So, and Palpatine apparently is controlling all this stuff all this time. Why don't you just give them one of those? I don't get it.
Yeah, and that's again.
Why are you building ships underground that then break through the planet? I mean, it looked cool. It was really cool looking scene, but it just I'm watching this and being, effect. Yeah, I'm like I get it, but there's other ways you can make this visually interesting that don't insult my intelligence.
And again, I think that was so much of the problem with it that we constantly had with it is overall it worked as a movie. It was but there's just so many places where the plot is just inconsistent, or things don't make sense in the past, or things don't make sense as a whole. You're like, I can understand the fact that the Empire built this gigantic battle station. Somehow they had the resources to do it. I have to suspend disbelief once.
Yeah. This
is I have to suspend disbelief every 15 seconds.
This is where I think you can't actually make a Star Wars plot too complicated. And this is where J.J. Abrams, I think, his skill as a director is able to cover for his shortcomings as a writer. He writes interesting, fast, kinetic scripts that don't make any sense at all if you stop and think about it for 10 seconds. So as a director, he doesn't ever give you the 10 seconds to stop and think about it. Because while watching it, in the back of my mind, I'm like, that doesn't really make any sense. But wait, what's going on now? I got to keep up. I can't stop and think about it. So he's not so much, asking you to make sense out of it as hoping you don't try and giving you no opportunity to do so. Yeah. And so it's only when you get to the end, you're like, well, it was a fun little movie. And then you stop and think about it in the car on the way home, and you're like, it doesn't make any damn sense. Yeah,
and that's the thing. It really is. It's almost visual art as opposed to being movie, so to speak.
It's a sequence of brightly colored images happening in an order very rapidly. I mean,
that's a movie, but especially a modern one. But yeah, I think that was to me the sort of biggest thing. There were a lot of eye rolling moments to this, but I think there were a few of them that I think were on stage, were done on screen in a way that they were sort of recognized to be eye-rolling moments. Quite frankly, Luke pulling the X-Wing out, I think, was a little bit.
I didn't care. I'm like, so we've learned that Force Ghosts can call down lightning and blow things up. They can catch lightsabers in the air, which presumably means they can also fight with a lightsaber. And they can use the Force to affect things in the real world. Why don't the Force ghosts of all the dead Jedi just come fight all the Sith monsters in the arena?
Yeah.
Which is why I thought that was going to happen, too. And I get into this later, but, with sci-fi and fantasy and genre films, you have to have rules for how the universe works. And part of the movie is teaching the audience the rules, which is fun. It's the world building. We like that. But then you have to follow them. and the Force Ghost thing, I felt like was introduced in a very limited fashion in the original trilogy, purely for convenient narrative purposes. Yoda's gone because we need to kill him. And so somebody has to resolve the question of who the Skywalkers are. Luke needs to have a conversation with Obi-Wan. Alec Guinness is getting older. Let's get him on screen,
Yeah, and we had the original Obi-Wan appear in Empire Strikes Back, but there's a real question of was he an hallucination because Han rides through
they
him.
leave it a little ambiguous, and it doesn't actually get resolved until Return of the Jedi when we actually see a real Force Ghost for the first time, I think, is when we see Obi-Wan talking to Luke.
No, again, we do see, Obi-Wan is a Force Ghost, obviously, in Empire, that's what it is. But again, one of the things I always really liked about the way they portrayed him is you have, Luke essentially hallucinating. He's been out in the cold, he's freezing to death, and it's this whole, help me, Obi-Wan, he's reaching out to him, and then you have Han ride through Obi-Wan. Of the idea, there's kind of this, metaphysical power of the Force influencing events here.
Well, Empire is written smartly to not... I mean, we all know now how it works, but you got to think back to when you first saw it. Luke sees the Obi-Wan hallucination, and you don't know if it's for real or not. But then he goes to Dagobah, and there is a Jedi Master there, so maybe it's something. But then at the end, he's hanging off Cloud City, and he calls out to Ben first for help, and gets nothing, and then switches to Leia, who's nearby. So you're thinking, well, maybe it wasn't really anything, and Ben really is just gone because he asked for help and didn't get anything. So the movie kind of establishes that you don't just get to conveniently summon these past Jedi to help you. Yeah. And we never saw any direct interference or activity of any kind. The most we had was Alec Guinness. Yeah. I mean, the ghost sits on a log. And you also
have the issue in conjunction with it. I think it's also, Yoda has just died. Mm-hmm. We have a disturbance in the Force. Could this be part of the reason why we have Ben resurfacing? It worked.
Yeah. I think the Ben ghost scene was there primarily to explain away why Obi-Wan told Luke Vader killed his father, which we later learn is not actually true. Probably was meant to be true when they wrote Star Wars, but they had to retcon it. So that's why it's there. And then, since we did it once, we'll throw in all the Force Ghosts at the end as like a happy, we're putting a bow on the story thing. Yeah. But now that we have this plot device, you have two choices. You either stop using it, or you establish the rules for it, and then you can use it. They did neither. They did not stop using it.
They did establish rules for it in the prequels. Of the idea that it takes time to figure out how to be able to contact, because it's the whole thing where it's, Qui-Gon has now passed beyond, we've encountered his Force Ghost. They, okay, this takes some time before they can actually do this. They have to do it, which if you have time passage in Return of the Jedi, it works. There's some time that has to pass for basically people to figure this out, maybe how powerful they are, depends on how long it takes to do it. But then you also have to basically have an understanding of how to contact them, where it's, okay, Luke maybe got that because of severe duress on Hoth. He has some idea that they're out there, and so he can contact them. Hey, Obi-Wan, you need to learn how to do this, and this is a special Force skill. These
they do kind of set that up. But and
then we use none of that again in the later three.
But Yoda can call down lightning. Well, if they can do all these things, then they can do anything, and all the other characters are null and void. Nobody really dies either then, because Luke comes back in this one. So
it becomes too much to lack of sort of a better term to pick on it a little bit. It becomes a world of wizards. Yeah. As opposed to being a wizard is unique.
Well, it becomes a crutch, too, for writers who are like, how do I deal with this? Oh, I'll just bring so-and-so back. Yeah. That'll make the fans happy and let me explain something. Yeah. Without having to introduce a new character nobody knows.
Yeah, and it's, there's the comment of, writing yourself in the corner and stuff. But, I mean, this is a thing that you shouldn't be writing yourself into the corner with. But, again, I think what to me was, intriguing about the Force Ghosts is you could very easily have just made the Force Ghosts advisors. You could have had it. Again, it kind of felt that way with the Sith. That's kind of the way they made the Sith. Like, oh, these are advisors. Yes, they're here. It's an audience. The Force Ghosts are here. This is important. They're all in Palpatine. They have to be here. This is their planet. But at the same time, they don't have any effect.
They're just kind of there.
Yeah, they're just kind of there.
Okay, your biggest all the feels moment.
I don't know. I have trouble with, quite frankly, them. I'm going to say it badly, but I think it's shoehorning emotion into Star Wars. Mm-hmm. I really have trouble with the idea that there are any genuine emotional scenes in Star Wars movies.
The only one in this movie that I really felt was really handled well and satisfactory was the Han Solo.
The Han Solo one. And I have to agree with you in that. And quite frankly, it's, say what you like about Harrison Ford in conjunction with it. The way they did that scene was Han Solo.
It was. And Harrison Ford could have so easily phoned all this stuff in. He knew how badly they wanted him to do this role. He didn't want to and didn't care.
Yeah.
And he's been about as good of a sport as Harrison Ford is capable of being. And I thought he did a great job with all this stuff, making us feel like it really was Han Solo again. And that maybe it's just because I'm a dad now, but like that particular scene, like when he gets killed in 7, I didn't like the way he went out. I understood why they did it, but that's pretty brutal, man. Like, you walk up to your old man, look him in the face, and stab him in the gut, Yeah. And it's not like his dad was like an abusive alcoholic or anything. He was just sort of
wasn't there.
It was just sort of a guy who wasn't suited to be a dad in the first place, and so it's not like he was a bad guy. So it's hard to understand that, and then the turn to the dark side, and they kind of laid the groundwork for in 8. Snoke says to Kylo Ren, "Yeah, you did it, but it tore your soul in half. So you didn't really turn to the dark side because it shouldn't have affected you that way if you truly had turned." And of course, we find out that it didn't really turn him. So having that scene where those two characters get to reconcile and we get to have a more proper send off to Han Solo than he's falling down a mine shaft like a gutted fish. The imagery, I just didn't like that's the way Han Solo went out.
And the other thing I thought was really great about it is the fact that they say he's not a Force Ghost. He's essentially a memory. They show him differently. He appears different on screen, and the way he appears in the Force Ghost. And the inclusion of, what is by far Han Solo's famous "I know," line. And you mentioned this, and I think is great. The fact that Ben doesn't even say the setup is what works so well. Because
that's exactly right. And there's a number of things I thought he could have said. "I'm sorry, I love you," whatever. And the way that they cut the scene, it didn't even land on me when I saw it live that it was a reference back to Empire Strikes Back. It wasn't until afterwards like, oh, they were doing a callback to that. And I should have recognized it, but the scene was acted and, Adam Driver was by far, I thought, the best performance in the movie. And him and Harrison Ford in that scene were the highlight of the whole thing.
I think he had some of the best and worst, quite frankly, acting in the movie.
Who did?
Adam Driver. Yeah.
What were the bad scenes?
I think the scene immediately before that, his scene where he's dying in conjunction, he's been stabbed, he's dying in conjunction with Rey, I think he actually does a very poor job doing. Mm-hmm. And again, part of that is I can point to very few emotional scenes in Star Wars that I think are well done. Again, the harking back scene, the Leia Han Solo scene in the carbonite chamber is another one that's well done. And we know, from long history of the fact that was ad-lib, that was not the line, they couldn't figure out how to make Han do it. That was one of the few poignant scenes. The one I always comment about, and it's one that always struck me is, and I'm going to go back to episode 2, and it's Padme and Anakin before they're sent out into the gladiatorial arena, and they're having that same kind of moment of that. It's, and just I love Natalie Portman as an actress. I think she's one of the sort of best actresses out there right now. That scene
right there, when they're side by side in the chariot and about to go out through that archway into the arena, that is the best scene of the entire prequels, I think.
Yeah, it's a great scene, but unfortunately, just before that is so forced.
That's the thing. The scene itself is one of the best done scenes. It's well acted, but the romance of those characters is so poorly set up and unbelievable that by the time you get there, you're like, what does she see in him?
Well, and the comment I had really from it, as I said, what really comes across to me is it comes across so much as Anakin comes across as the teenager who has no understanding of love because he's not allowed to experience it. He's not supposed to experience it. It's denied him.
Which makes sense narratively, but they don't set that up very well either. We just kind of have to figure that out on our own. And Star Wars is not a movie that's about asking you to figure things out.
Yeah, and it comes across well as what it is. But, that scene, as I said, the only emotional poignancy in that scene is Natalie Portman's acting. Mm-hmm. Her line is horrid, but it sounds so sincere.
Yeah,
and it's one of those things where she's good, and it shows. I was that was the scene that truly made it to me is like she is really good as an actress because it's like that scene.
Hayden Christensen's a fine actor too. They're doing the best they could with some ham-fisted material,
with some real ham-fisted lines, some really bad lines and stuff like that. And it does get some emotional poignancy in it, but because the lines are so bad, it just doesn't work. And that's what I said. I have trouble with that. And now you have the problem that anytime they try to do these sort of emotional scenes, I'm constantly hampered by the dialogue.
Well, let's think about episode 4. What's the most emotional scene in episode 4? When Ben dies, basically?
Yeah, it's got to be him with the... Or you could have it sort of with the scene when Leia sort of comes up and puts the cloak on him afterward. I can't believe he's gone.
Yeah. There's a couple of tender moments there, but it's an adventure movie. There's not a lot of deep emotion. Empire Strikes Back has a lot more. You've got, Han and Leia while they're fixing the Falcon. You've got the scene where he's being tortured. You never see that in a Star Wars movie now.
Well, even the initial scene where Leia kisses Luke and sort of out of spite for Han, which is kind of hilarious now.
I think that's why that movie's the best. Like the whole movie is slow-moving character development with a relatively few handful of action sequences. There's not a ton of action in that. And then, the scenes at the end, I mean, there's a lot of just getting beaten over the head over and over and over with well done but short emotional scenes. And Luke's entire fight with Vader is an emotional scene, basically.
Well, even quite frankly, Lando and Han. Yeah. It's a very emotional scene. The idea these are old friends, but they had some, difficult parting, whatever it might be, and what's coming back to haunt them.
But then Return of the Jedi doesn't have as much of that, You get a little bit in Jabba's chambers.
You get Jabba's chambers.
It's just setting up an action sequence, and then we go to Dagobah, and then we set up 3 action sequences that take place at once.
The only one I think you could say you have it is and I'm going to credit it to John Williams' music, is them in the Ewok village, Luke and Leia talking about their past.
Yeah, that one is pretty good.
It's pretty good, but that scene is made by John Williams' music in many respects. He's
that's when Luke decides he has to go back. Yeah, that is well done. And then when the climax of the entire thing is when Luke finally loses his mind and goes crazy on Vader and cuts his arm off, and that's also pretty well done. But the point is, that's 9 hours of filming we just went over, and there's a handful of scenes. Yeah, and then these sequels, there's just not much of it there.
Again, there's also not much of it there. Though I do think here the one problem you really bumped into is some of them felt forced. Again, the one that I think is and if I remember, Rose and Finn have the slight tender moment. They have a kiss. I don't know if they kiss or they have at least a parting goodbye. They head off in different directions. You kind of have this wait, did they have a falling out type of feeling with it? And there's no explanation. There's nothing for it.
So that would have been more interesting if we learned that in the off season, kind of between these two movies, they did develop a romance and then they parted ways. And when we're coming back to see them again as the audience, there's this emotional distance. Would have made both characters a little more believable and interesting. Yeah, and almost
it would have also worked with I'm not going on the mission, I have to do this thing. Could have been, no, I'm doing this thing, so I'm not with you.
Yeah, there could have been something to that, and you could, if you're going to write Rose out, which I think is a mistake, but there's, I don't know, a smarter way to do it.
There was vastly smarter ways to do it.
All right, so let's do, so the on the fanboy scale, normally the scales go from 1 to 10. We go from Phantom Menace to Empire Strikes Back.
Joy.
where do you put this one?
So I think as to where I have it, I would definitely put this as, in my mind, sort of the second best of the last 3. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm a fan of Episode 8. I actually enjoyed Episode 8. I really think
I did too. Of the last 3, I would have put Episode 8 as the best of them.
Yeah. The big question I have sort of with this one is, where does this rank against sort of my lowest tier of the original trilogy, which is Return of the Jedi?
Well, before that, is it better than all 3 of the prequels?
Well, so that's the thing I bump into is it's where, to me, it gets messy, is sort of my lowest rank of the original trilogy is conjunction with Return of the Jedi. My highest rank of the prequel trilogy is in many respects sort of our finale, as we come into the sort of Revenge of the Sith.
Episode 3, yeah.
Episode 3.
But by far the best of those.
By far the best of those. I have trouble at times sort of putting those two against each other because they're tainted by what they're in front of. Return of the Jedi is the lowest, and that's the top, and I'd rank them together is sort of what it is.
Because Jedi is really 2 movies, right? You've got the Jabba's Palace scene, which is fantastic, but it's a little 45-minute movie unto itself. Yep. And then it's just kind of winding down action to resolve some hanging plot points.
And some cool, interesting moments in presentations, sort of things like that. Whereas, again, like Episode 3, you get into these just sort of, hey, we've got the real fall, but you've got these just incredibly forced scenes in the middle of it. Mm-hmm. The idea that, the fall's not as dramatic as it could have been. This is the most dramatic moment of 3 movies. So I kind of bump into that. And so that's my thing, is it's where does it fit relative to those? And I guess for me, I would put it above Episode 3 and below Return of the Jedi. But there's times when I'd even put Episode 3 above Return of the Jedi. So it's one of those where I'm right in there is where I sort of feel like we're solidly mediocre.
Yeah.
But where in the mediocrity we are, I'm not sure. It's not one of the best ones. It's definitely not one of the worst ones.
I'm kind of with you. I would put all 3 of the originals above all 3 of the sequels. And I think I would put all 3 of the sequels above all 3 of the prequels, for the most part, in terms of just overall quality. It's just, but you're right, it's hard to isolate any one of them and say where it fits in this pantheon, because you have to look at each one. To do that, you have to look at each one as just a movie by itself. Yeah. But you can't look at any of them, except for Star Wars, as a movie by itself.
Yeah, and I would almost always put 2 of each of the trilogies above the third by a fairly long margin. And so that's where it then bumps into, well, when I say that, and I put Return of the Jedi that far below that, does something else, does one of the best ones and the other one pop up above it? Same as Episode 2 and Episode 3 are so much better than Episode 1. Are they really is it really worse than, episode 7? I don't know.
So if you're going to do all 9, so I'll give you my order. I would probably go 5 and then 4 for sure.
Yep. I think we're both going to agree 5 and 4 are probably
then
the
it gets tricky. I might even say 8 next. I know it's like a kind of a controversial film, but just in terms of how well it's made and how coherent the vision is on it.
Yep. I'm going to stick with you, actually. I'm going to go 5, 4. I'm actually going to put 8 up there. And
I'd probably say 8
comfortable saying 8
next. Up there. Then I would probably go with Jedi, although I can't tell if that's because it really is that good or because I saw it when I was 8 years old and I just remember it, and one of the first movies I ever saw. But I'd go Jedi next, then probably 7, then 9, then basically 3, 2, 1.
Okay. And that's the thing is, I think we're basically sort of in conjunction with it. I think I would as well, I'd probably put 7 above 9. I think the real question I sort of get into is I would probably put 7, quite frankly, to me, in many respects above Jedi. But I would also then say I've got I've now got episode 3 kind of warring in there of exactly where does episode 3 fit in there.
7's tough because it's a soft reboot too. So, I mean, is it a better movie than Jedi? Well, yeah. I mean, it is. And speaking of things that don't make any sense, we overlook all the plot points in Jedi that make no sense at all. When you
Why are we building a second Death Star when the first one didn't work?
Well, and it's just like, what was Luke's plan going into Jabba's palace? Like, if you watch it and think, okay, was this the plan all along? Like, did he see all this coming? It has all of the same, we have space wizards who see the future problems that the prequels have. But since we saw it when we were 8, we don't care.
Yeah.
We overlook those warts.
Yeah, and then definitely, 1 and 2 are the lowest. And I think it's unfortunate because I still think one of the best scenes I still think of all the movies is in episode 1, which is the final Jedi battle in episode 1, where the fact that the Jedi are actually acrobatic.
Yeah, it's incredibly well done. The reason the scene doesn't work is not because it's not well done. It's because there's no stakes. We don't know who these characters are, and we don't care.
Yeah, and there's just it's as a scene, it's great, but as a movie, it's terrible. And I think you get it. There's stuff in episode 2 that I'm the same way about. Even though I put it really low. There's stuff in episode 9 that I'm the same way about. And it's I constantly have those things where I'm like, there's great scenes in these movies that unfortunately are hampered by the rest of the movie. And then you look at it and say, there's great movies in these trilogies that are unfortunately hampered by the rest of the trilogy.
So I've got this working theory for why these trilogies are all so different. I think you'd probably agree that the original and this new trilogy are probably the closest in tone and overall quality. Yeah. And the prequels are by far the lowest of these. But I've got a theory that the reason why it's like this, the original trilogy, I think, hit perfect circumstances. You have, and let me back up. I think what's missing from the sequels is George Lucas. I never thought I would say that after seeing the prequels.
I agree with you,
but
quite frankly.
Kathleen Kennedy at Disney was put in charge of sort of the direction of the Star Wars property. And I don't know her or anything about her, but I just don't understand the decision-making process of saying, we know we're going to make a trilogy. We're going to hire somebody who's notorious for not knowing how to tie up loose ends and not really finishing a narrative arc. Have him write the first chapter and then hand it off to somebody else. And it wasn't going to get handed off to a third person, I think. Trevorrow was supposed to do the
quite frankly, I think they should have handed it off to a third person.
Probably should have.
So, I think J.J. Abrams as episode 7 was fine. Again, I don't think episode 7 is particularly bad. I think there's a little fan service in it. And
it's what I expected J.J. Abrams to do. And I'm not trying to pick on him. He's a good director. I like his movies.
Yeah, I would see movies simply because he's a director in them because I like his movies. But I think what you really bumped into with it, and again, it's sort of your idea that Lucas is missing. What I really think was missing from it is it didn't have a story. We wanted to reboot Star Wars, but didn't know what to do with it.
It was a sequence of events involving characters, and there was no overarching, unifying sort of narrative theme or vision. The creative direction was not there. It was recycling a bunch of old ideas, putting them into a blender, pulling them out in a different order, and stitching it all together. Which, if you like Star Wars, it was fun to watch. It was satisfying in a lot of ways. But I don't feel like it told a story, really.
But then I really felt another thing I think with it is, and particularly I think episode 9 suffered from this, and I think episode 7 suffered from it as well, but episode 8 did not as much. To me, episode 9 had way too much fan service in it. It seemed like it was, we want to show you this because we all know you want to see it. Mm-hmm. We want Emperor Palpatine. We want somebody who's like definitively evil. We want to have, Leia have a lightsaber. It's all like, these are things that you
what else can they do after Snoke's dead, right? Like, they decided Kylo Ren as a threat. He's already been humanized, and we know he's going to be redeemed somehow. So what's left? Like something else has to be there.
But there's your arc problem. I mean, there's your arc problem. And again, I think you could have done it.
So we say it was Palpatine the whole time.
Well, again, I'm going to jump on this draft script. And if you guys haven't seen it, the listeners that are out there, I would look this thing up. It's very interesting. It's supposedly real. Is what is the draft script. In many respects, Hux became the bad boy.
That would have made a lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
Because he has the rivalry with Palpatine, and there was some tension there, the same way there was with Vader.
Yeah.
Or not with Palpatine, with Kylo Ren.
Yeah, and the thing that they sort of set up, and the thing that I liked actually in conjunction with, he's set up as essentially becoming a brutal dictator. And the idea that, it's, hey, I have the space wizard, we had the space wizard who had his own agenda. My agenda is I intend to, grind the universe under my boot heel.
Yeah, I would love to see him turn into the equivalent of the Han Solo character. Like, I don't buy all this mysticism and stuff. I don't need any of that stuff. This is a military operation.
Yeah.
We're going to be a military.
And I think they were doing a little bit of that. And even the idea that, there being sort of an evil government. And apparently, like, one of the scenes in it is you were actually going to see the new headquarters. And it was literally the Coruscant, the building we've seen from episode 1 that was the Republic's headquarters, is a ruin. And they built the other one on top of it. And it was like, okay, cool. Like, this is literally grinding the Republic underneath your boot heel type of feel.
So I feel like the original trilogy works so well because you had Lucas's creativity and vision, but you had enough externalities, enough outside limitations and controls on that to rein in some of his terrible tendencies. Because with creativity, with genius comes insanity. You needed about 10% of his core ideas to be shaped and molded into a coherent form, and they had that with the original trilogy. They had budget limitations, they had casting limitations. They had his wife was the editor, and she fixed a lot of structural problems with how the story was being told. And then you had John Williams, who had a score that made it all work. So, you had the magical combination of a guy with creativity, enough budget to do a lot of it, but not enough budget to do all of it.
Yeah.
And then other people in charge saying, okay, this is Fox's last bet on movies, and if this doesn't work, we're out of business.
Yeah.
So shoot for the moon, kid. And they did. And then the prequels were the opposite. It was all George Lucas's creativity, with nobody standing up to him and saying, this idea is terrible and stupid. And it badly needed that. And
you also didn't have really good direction in the first ones, I don't think. And it's, Lucas was, I think, taking more active hand in direction. It showed.
It was well cast. It just, people were misused. I take that back. Samuel L. Jackson was not well cast for his role.
I think he was well cast for his role if they would have made his role what it should have been.
Well, exactly, yeah. He's an energetic, loud, action-y, shouty kind of actor. And they made him play this quiet, contemplative, wise Jedi. No.
Yeah, he should have been much more a general. I mean, that's the thing. It would have worked as to what it was. Hey, I'm the head of the Jedi Council. We're all generals. I am the lead general. He could have been a military figure, quite frankly. Is what it is. But yeah, I think there was a bit of an issue there. And I'm exactly right. I think it was the prequels were creativity out of control.
And then the sequels were all the production value and all the oversight and everything else, but no creative spark in the middle of it.
Yeah, and you saw the creative spark and then it didn't go anywhere. And again, part of that I think was the episode 9 feeling the need to reset episode 8, episode 8 feeling the need to reset episode 7. Mm-hmm. It was them imposing their own creativity as opposed to being, no, this is where we're going to go. This is the movie you're writing.
Yeah.
By the end of episode 3, this is where we're going to be. By the end of episode 2, this is where we're going to be. By the end of episode 1, this is where we're going to be. Now write it.
Yep.
Then I think it would have worked.
They needed Lucas as a creative consultant in a non-binding capacity to say, here's where I see this going. Here's some ideas. They would have probably discarded 90% of it, but the 10% they would have kept would have tied all three of these films together into something a little more cohesive.
And you really see it. I think even when you look at any sort of the great collaborations, any kind of great movies, great businesses in many respects, you always have the sort of the crazy creative person and the financial person who deals with everything else, and it works. And when you have that combination, everything works really well. And Star Wars had the perfect storm of that. It was fortunate. It was in many respects more luck than planning.
Yeah.
I think Empire was more planning. And that's the reason why I think everybody says Empire is the best one of it, is they realized that was what was needed. They brought in a very talented director.
Well, a very different type of movie. Star Wars was action, adventure, space, Western.
Yeah.
Empire Strikes Back was a much more slow and methodical movie that was about these characters. And you and I were talking the other day about what went wrong with the sequels. And I've got one specific thing that I think sent the entire thing on the wrong path. Everything was either working fine or was salvageable up until Rey reaches out and hands that lightsaber to Luke. And they end the movie there. And the problem is, then you basically have to pick up the next movie where that left off. Then you'll look at episode 4 versus 5, where they blow up the Death Star, we're all getting medals and ribbons, and we've forgotten about the fact that there's still this Imperial fleet that controls everything. Who cares? The movie's over. And then 3 years go by. And so you have all of this off-screen development of these characters where you can kind of rewrite the characters. You can slot them into the roles they need to have in the film where it picks up. And there's growth there, and there's things that can happen off-screen that you can't present in a convincing fashion in a 2-hour movie. So Han Solo goes from the smuggler with the heart of gold to Captain Solo in the rebellion, who's been dodging bounty hunters, and his life is about to catch up to him. He's trying to get back to it and pay off his debts.
Yeah.
We don't have to see all that. We can just be told in his conversation with General Riken that he has to go, because someone's going to kill him eventually if he doesn't. We've seen Luke
He's also
mature.
attracting undesired attention to the rebellion, which is still a rebellion. This is not an accepted sort of force.
We've seen Luke mature. We've seen Leia mature into her roles. We've seen the rebellion mature. You can see that they're outmanned or on the gun. A lot of things have happened that's conveyed to us very effectively in a visual way.
The other thing we actually see occur in Empire Strikes Back is the Empire matures.
Yes.
We see them
We see the strength and breadth of their fleet. We see the relationships with their commanders. I mean, the relationship between Captain Piet and Admiral Ozzel plays out in probably 6 total minutes of screen time.
Yeah.
It's better written than anybody in the sequels.
Yeah. And that's, I think, the thing that one of the things we do is we get to the fact that, like, no, this, the rebellion scored this tremendous victory. It's an amazing thing. And in the following 3 years, they couldn't follow up on it.
Yeah,
it's still a rebellion.
Yeah, you blew up the one thing.
Yeah.
All these ships are still out there. Vader survived. He's in charge of it all. He's taken on a more prominent role with Tarkin being gone. All this stuff just happens, and it's just shown to us in a really effective way. With Episode 8, it starts 3 minutes later.
Yeah.
The next scene is Luke picking up the lightsaber and literally throwing it over his shoulder.
Which we know is symbolic.
And then they're evacuating the rebel base, so that happens right away. And if you kind of watch those all together, you're like, well, wait a minute. The last thing we saw was the Empire on the run. The planet's blowing up. Kylo Ren's been knocked out. They're scrambling. And then this entire giant fleet shows up half an hour later while they're evacuating. Where was that fleet all this time? It just doesn't make any sense. And it's because they needed more time in the story to let the characters grow and breathe and kind of reseat them in the story.
The story, I mean, the sequels as a whole had timing problems.
Yeah.
How much time takes place between things.
It was better in 9. You got to see that there's some thing. I don't know how much time has passed. A couple months, presumably, maybe a year.
Yeah. But
some time has passed, which it has to, so they can establish a new base and do these things.
But interestingly,
that works so much better.
And we're going to get into this. We're not going to talk about it. That's my primary complaint with The Mandalorian. Is The Mandalorian, that the sense of timing isn't there. You don't understand when things take place. So I'm not going to get into that now, but I think there's a very valid issue, I think, in the sequels of just what is the timing.
Well, I think we're going to wrap this one up. I actually have in our notes here an additional 6 pages of what I call narrative nitpicking.
Narrative nitpicking.
We might save this another episode, but really quickly, opening sequence. Kirk, you and I talked about how we see Kylo Ren looking for the Wayfinder.
Yeah.
And he's on some planet just murdering people.
Yeah.
And we're like, we don't know who the planet is or who these people are. And then he finds it and he leaves. And we said, wouldn't it make more sense if that was like Vader's castle or something? Why didn't he go to Mustafar and say it was there? Well, it turns out that was Mustafar, and he's fighting the natives. I don't remember those people from Episode 3, but they did do that. They just didn't bother to tell us for some reason. I don't get that. And then we've got Pisana, the planet with the Burning Man Festival. they all go to.
I'm glad I'm not the only person who immediately said that's the Burning Man Festival.
Yeah, that's the first thing I thought. I still don't understand a bunch of that. I think the one place that you and I both thought the scenery worked really well was what I call the World War II planet.
Okay.
When they're going to get 3PO hacked so they can get him to talk in Sith language, and they go to this planet that looks like Berlin or Poland, like in 1943, right?
Yeah.
It's snowy, and they're going door to door, and it just has kind of a World War II.
It has a very dark World War II feel to it, which, let's face it, that's what the Empire is.
Yeah, it's carried out extremely well. That whole sequence is kind of also pointless, but that setting was really well done, and I really liked how they.
The other problem is it didn't make any sense in timing.
No, it didn't. And Endor. So I looked this up because we talked about how did the Death Star blow up and crash on Endor. Bear in mind, Endor is the planet. Not the moon. The moon is the forest moon of Endor, and I looked this up. The Death Star does not crash on the forest moon of Endor. It is blown out of orbit and inexplicably crashes largely intact on the ocean moon of Endor somewhere else.
Even though we see it explode. Oh, and then we see it explode even more in the special edition.
Have you ever seen a video of like some large piece of equipment falling over, like a crane or a building or something?
Yeah.
These things are not engineered to withstand the fall forces that they experience under their own weight, and they immediately collapse. Now let's take a thing that's engineered to float in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Okay, it does not have the structural integrity to survive a atmospheric speed collision with it should be vaporized. There should be nothing left of it or half the moon, but there it sits. It just made no sense. And you know what? I don't expect hyper-realism from my Star Wars.
Yeah.
Just enough they're not going, how?
Yeah.
Did nobody ever put 1 second of thought into this scene?
And my problem wasn't the Death Star. My problem was why do we have this dagger that points to some ruined portion of the Death Star?
This is the only narrative nitpick I really want to get into in any detail. So let's go through the sequence of events.
We're both going to chew up the dagger.
I wrote this down. Sequence of events. Death Star 2 explodes. Wreckage lands on the ocean moon of Endor. And then this...
on Endor, not the moon.
Ocean moon of Endor. Then this happens at some point. Somebody goes down there to where it is and decides that one, the Sith Wayfinder is in the broom closet in the throne room, and we may need it someday. We're not going to actually go get it, although we know exactly where it is. We're going to leave it there.
Yep.
Okay. And we're going to make a map so somebody else who doesn't know where it is can find it. Who? We don't know. Presumably the guy that makes this map. Who is this? Ochi or whatever his name is? So, while standing in a specific spot on the cliff, rather than just writing down or taking a picture of it or something, with his iPhone, he decides, I'm going to make a knife.
Yeah.
As you do. When you want to remember where something is, you make a knife out of it. Okay? And I'm going to inscribe which moon I was on, not where I was standing, but which moon I was on, not explain how to use the knife to find it, have a little slidey thing, and then that's how we're going to find it. Then we're just going to assume that this planet with 400-foot waves and a giant metal thing the Titanic is dying, okay? The ocean is eating it. But the Death Star is going to sit there in this ocean with these giant waves and just never be disturbed for the next decade. So somebody makes this knife, and that is the map. And then the guy that has the knife is Ochi.
Yeah.
He then kills
Rey's... He may have made the knife. We're
never told. He then, at some point after that, because he has it, kills Rey's parents.
Yes. Because
they won't tell him where Rey is, even though the Emperor doesn't want to kill her after all. But we're not told
he wants to catch her. He's a bounty hunter.
And then he goes to Burning Man. All right?
Yeah.
And then dies like 3 miles away underneath the snake pit.
By a snake, yeah. Snake.
Why? What was he doing? Why was he there? I don't understand. And then Luke apparently figures out that he was there with the knife because Luke had tracked the Wayfinder there, but the Wayfinder was never there, just the knife was. Yeah. And then they follow Luke's instructions to go find his dead body and the knife. I guess they got lucky that he happened to die there, or they would have had a cold trail. And then that's kind of where so that's the sequence of events, right?
Yeah.
That's lunacy.
And then the other problem with it is that when you start going through that sequence of events, it starts to imply, no, wait, Ochi made the knife after he killed Rey and after he was on the Burning Man. No, wait. He has it in both places.
I don't understand it. And it only works because while you're watching it, you're like, this is fun. This is a fun movie and things are happening. So you don't stop to think about any of this. I mean, in the back of my mind, I'm like, none of this makes any sense. As I'm watching it, I know when I stop and think about this afterwards, none of this will make any sense.
Well, and the one that I had trouble with, and it's actually something that I caught, and again, remember I saw just the 3/4 of the movie, so I didn't actually see the full thing about who Rey's parents were.
Mm-hmm.
I had seen the knife stabbing scene, but I didn't get the follow-up from Kylo Ren and the rest of it as to who her parents were. When I saw it, I thought it was Beru and Lars.
Oh.
That's who I actually thought. So when I saw the imagery, I'm like,
made even
is
less
that Beru
sense.
and Lars? And the idea that it was like, okay, they're actually they're the parent. And my immediate take is, oh, that's why, that was the way they hit her. They hit her with Beru and Lars, that's what it was. Because they weren't actually dead, the whole thing, and that's where I thought they were going to go. And I was like, wait, this doesn't reconcile with everything else then that I saw at piecemeal. And then when I saw the explanation, it's, oh, okay, they're non-entities we've never seen before.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I've also got, and I got it written down here, my Skywalker family genealogy. All right, so this is the last thing. Aren't Rey and Kylo Ren like half second cousins?
I don't know.
So okay, I've got at the top I've got Bill Palpatine. I don't know what his first name is. I don't know what his first name is. So I got
Emperor.
I got Bill Palpatine and Shmi Skywalker have Anakin here. Anakin and Padme have Leia. Leia and Solo have Ben. Right. So Bill is Ben's 1, 2, 3 generations up, and then Bill has with an unknown other woman has another daughter. We think it's the daughter, who then has Rey, and then there's a stepdad, I guess, again. And so Rey would be half cousins with Leia and Luke, which means that she would be second cousins, I guess, with
or whatever's once removed. I can't remember the whole genealogy thing.
So and someone challenged me on this and said, well, we don't know that Palpatine is Anakin's father, but we do. There was a comic that said that, and Disney has confirmed that it is canon. So there you go. I I'll put a picture of this up on our Twitter feed, and everybody can challenge me in my Bill Palpatine genealogy. The Hobbit, it is not.
I think his first name should be Emperor, because they're all Emperor, right?
Well, when the prequels came out, his name was given as Kos, K-O-S. Remember that being in IMDb at the time?
Okay.
It's since been changed to something else. I forget what it was.
Okay.
But he's Bill in my book. Okay, so we've run a long time. We'll go through other narrative nitpicks at some other time. That might be an episode we do just for fun to say, to go through some of these. But the dagger's the one that just kind of, pardon the pun, stuck in me. I was just like,
it's such a MacGuffin.
I know.
The problem is it's such a MacGuffin.
I know. It's a whole movie full of MacGuffins. MacGuffins in search of MacGuffins. So there we are. All right, so we're going to wrap this up. So next up, this is season 3, episode 1. We were going to talk some Baby Yoda, but we'll kick that to the next episode, I think. So like I said at the beginning, we're going to experiment with some new formats, some new types of episodes, and we're going to be looking at doing some shorter format episodes just to make sure we can get more content out. We might talk about one case or one topic or updating a prior case or something like that in a more condensed format. We also had the idea of doing a new type of episode where we don't talk about the law or the geek stuff specifically so much as how old IP disputes have shaped the modern face of these things. And the example Kirk gave me is, we have certain movie studios now because of patent disputes with Thomas Edison.
Yeah, actually most of the movie studios now.
So that'll be interesting. And then we'll do, like I said, probably do some follow-up episodes to revisit topics we covered years ago now that have new developments. And if we just run out of time and don't have any content, we will selectively and strategically pick old episodes to re-air that, as you will see over the course of the year, bear a relationship to a theme that we're working on sort of in each quarter of the year.
Part of the reason we're also going to re-air them is there's certain things we have touched on previously that we're going to go into in more detail. And so there's some value of pointing out that we've gone to this. Here's some basic, like 1 or 2 episodes. And by the way, here's where we're going to go next.
Yeah, if you listen to some of our old catalog, there's a whole lot of, that could be a whole separate episode. Comments we make. We never made those episodes, so we may do some of those. And then one other thing, a call to action. We are looking to revamp our website, make it a little more interactive and bloggy. Maybe post, more direct links or embed copies of episodes and things like that. So if you are a webby person who might be interested in helping out with that, let us know, and we'll see what we can do. All right, so check out our website, lggpodcast.com. It has the links to our various platforms where you can download prior episodes and get in touch with us. We are on Twitter, we are on Facebook, and we have the email. Subscribe to this podcast on the platforms, give us a review, and that helps new listeners find us. You can find me on Twitter at Benjamin Siders, and Kirk is at KirkBMN. We brought Lorem to the library, and he will once again play us out.
The views expressed by the participants of this program are their own and do not represent the views of, nor are they endorsed by Lewis Rice LLC, its officers, directors, employees, agents, representatives, shareholders, and subsidiaries. None of the content should be considered legal advice. As always, consult a lawyer. This podcast was produced and recorded in St. Louis, Missouri.